Welcome, everyone, to the Australian Bitcoin podcast. In this episode, you're listening to myself, Justin, and Daniel from HardBlock. Today, we'll be discussing recent global and local Bitcoin news. But before we start, a quick word from our sponsor. The Australian Bitcoin podcast is brought to you by hardblock.com.au. HardBlock is Australia's oldest Bitcoin-only exchange. They have no added fees and are optimized for dollar cost averaging. Sign up to HardBlock today using the discount link in the description below to receive free auto-send batched Bitcoin withdrawals for 6 months. All right, Daniel, how's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. And yourself?
Can't complain. Yeah. What have you been up to?
A few things. So I've been playing around with Lightning a little bit. We're considering implementing Lightning deposits and withdrawals.
How's that process going for you?
Yeah, well, yes, I've been playing around with core Lightning because most people use LND.
Yeah.
But obviously we had the discussion with Rusty and he's in Adelaide, so I thought I'd like to try core Lightning.
Yeah.
And so I've been playing around with that. And overall, the core Lightning itself, I actually found it pretty easy, and I didn't find the documentation for installing core Lightning was pretty good. Rusty actually created a video. It's on YouTube, about an hour long, where he just sets up the core Lightning on his Linux machine, and he just goes through all the basic. He just sets it up and does the first depositing Bitcoin to the Lightning node, and then how to set up a channel, and just all the basics, right? It's like a 101. So that video is very good. So I followed along with the video, and it was actually all pretty easy, that part. But so now I'm kind of on the part, I'm trying to connect it to my Zeus wallet, and I'm kind of having some issues with that, still stuck on that, trying to get past that. But so apparently the way to do it is, if I've got my Lightning Core node, you need to install something else on top of it to expose a REST API. So Ride the Lightning provided a plugin for core Lightning that allows you to expose the REST API. So I done that, but I'm not sure if I seem to have done correctly, but for some reason I can't connect to my Zeus wallet. It says it can't find it gives me connection timed out when I attempt it. So I have to just figure out what's wrong there.
Takes a bit of tinkering, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I set up a LND Lightning node, and that already has ports open that you can connect to immediately. So you don't need Ride the Lightning, but I still have Ride the Lightning because it helps better with channel management. It's a nice visual kind of interface. But even with LND and I would say significant amount of documentation they have, and I even followed Kitan's guide. I was doing it in kind of a non-standard way in terms of where I had the data files. So I had to really get my head around the config file properly, rather than just following the instructions. I had to understand what I was doing in it, and even just some of the extra flags that you can add, when you're typing in the command of starting up the LND node itself, because my implementation was a bit non-standard, and it took me a long time to get my head around that. So I feel your pain. I feel like maybe LND is just that little bit easier than core Lightning at the moment, but it sounds like from Rusty's conversation that we had with him a while back, they're trying to build that out basically to make it a bit easier. So
I think that's what you said, sometimes when you don't do the standard implementation, that's kind of when you can run into troubles.
Yes.
And
it's a good learning process though. It's good. I feel like I learn a lot by doing it, but now I don't know, it's because I haven't done it for a while. I feel like I've probably forgotten most of what I learned.
And I found the actual running core Lightning, I found that actually pretty easy. And stuff. Rusty's video was very good. But then, just doing the kind of next step of actually connecting it to Zeus, there wasn't that much documentation on it, and I'm just trying to kind of figure it out myself, because I don't really have there's no step-by-step guide for it.
Exactly.
So I'm trying to kind of figure it out by myself. So I'm okay, but I'm not a genius kind of type of engineering. So I'm just trying to figure out how to do it, but I think I'll get it done.
I reckon you will. And it just shows how early we are, isn't it? Because once I got it set up, it did take me a decent chunk of a weekend to get it set up. But my first thought was most people probably couldn't do this, even with good documentation. So I feel like we're probably away from like a one-click install of something like a Lightning node backed by a Bitcoin core or something like that. But it's probably where we're going to need to get to for then most people to like run a Lightning node or something. Or maybe we have like trusted Lightning nodes that people will, work with in their community. But it's moments like these that you realize like we're still very, very early with Bitcoin in terms of the implementation. But still fun to dabble and tinker with that sort of stuff.
And actually another thing, because like for our exchange, another possibility considering is a contact versus the service, whatever name. IBEX. Yes, I had a meeting with them. So there's a few services like that, but basically they provide an API.
Yeah.
I'm considering maybe just using that, so we wouldn't run our own node.
Yeah.
But it does kind of make, from creating from an exchange and business perspective, it does mean a bit less overhead and maintenance. So I had a discussion with IBEX, and they provide like a very simple API for doing Lightning invoices and payments, and then they do over node management.
Exactly, because it's the channel management stuff that becomes a bit like all the inbound and outbound liquidity, and that becomes the confusing part. And there's a lot of scripts that people are kind of building up to be able to do that automatically. But it's one of those things where like you get all these disparate parts, and when you try to piece them together, they don't always quite fit perfectly. When you just go to a one-stop shop solution, at least initially, while it's still pretty early, that can sometimes be much less overhead, much less stress, and you know that it's very efficient in terms of how the channels are balanced and everything else. So
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And like for personally, like I can run a personal node for myself, but like for the business, it's also good to have something like which doesn't, because for the business you need it to be reliable. You don't like the Lightning has stopped working.
Exactly.
And it's like, but we're a small team, and just having somebody manage that over time and look after it. And if somebody doesn't, drops the ball, like when customers don't have Lightning withdrawals, so using a service might be easier.
Yeah, figure it out as we go.
Yeah.
I'm curious, from the last podcast, we talked a bit about Zoe, who ended up being, well, we're pretty certain that she was scammed, basically. And she was trying to then follow up and maybe go with someone that was going to try to recover the funds for a 10% sort of fee or something like that. How's it all going?
Yeah. Okay. So that's right. I do have some updates. Actually, sent me some messages yesterday. It's kind of, it's not the West. Okay, so the news is not the West, but it's still kind of tragic. So basically, the last time, like you said, we left it at, she found some recovery service. The recovery is outside the domain here. It's briskabetment.com. briskabetment.com. And
do they look legit? Because
I think they're another scam.
Well, yeah, because if they say give us 10% up front, that seems like a scam. But if they say we'll take 10% when we find it for you, I would say that seems less like a scam, but could still go horribly wrong because they could just keep the 100% once they find it.
Yeah. So I mean, like because I know there are some kind of recovery services, and they usually but they mostly usually work when somebody loses their keys, but they know the password or whatever.
Yeah.
And they know part of the password, and they if they can help you recover it if you know some clues about it. So I know that. So initially I thought maybe it's true, like you said, but the more I dug into it, I don't think it's true. I think it's another scam.
Yeah. Did they contact her, or did she?
No. So she found them.
Oh, good, because I was going to say that would be a very elaborate grift, wouldn't it? Is that you step in as the saver and say like, "Hey, look, we can probably get this back for you," and you're actually the original scammer. But so she found them.
Yeah, she found them, but I'm pretty certain it's another scam, and I'll explain why. So I think the way they work, it seems scam. There's a thing called recovery scams. I went on ICCC. I've done some research, and apparently we've got an article. ICCC has an article about scammers targeting victims again through money recovery scams. So that's a thing where victims get targeted again through money recovery scams. And she thought it might be legit because she contacted them, but I think they actually it's a different set of scammers. But it seems that scammers set up website. It's basically like a honey trap type thing, where victims come to them and they scam them again. So I looked at the website. First, it said it's been operating from 2016, but the website was only registered like 2 or 3 months ago. And they've got Trustpilot reviews, but again, it's from the last 2 months. Only a handful review. They somehow must have faked the reviews. but again, I told her, because initially I thought maybe it's true, but I told her don't give him money up front. But so they did ask for money up front. They wanted $7,000 up front.
Wow.
$7,000 up front, and they said they would do it 10%. So the more I looked at it, I told her, like, whatever you do, don't give money up front.
Definitely, there's no guarantee that they can find anything.
No, it's not guarantee, but the more I'm looking, it's just another scam.
Yeah.
Like, it's really sad for her, because it's like she just got scammed and she's just looking somewhere, and when there's another, it's like wherever she turns, it's like, it's kind of,
I guess that sunk cost fallacy, where she's like, oh, I've already put in whatever it is, 400,000. What's another 10 to try to get it back?
So she sent me some of the messages that they sent her. Okay, so she said, okay, she told me that she still hasn't given up, but is close. So luckily she is a bit skeptical. I don't think she'll give him the money. Okay, so she told me this is what they told her. So the CMC is a cybersecurity commission backed by the Department of Defense to monitor cyber activities. So we're saying the business, CMC. Most of the information is classified, which cannot be found on the surface web. You can't find relevant information because you don't have the clearance access to do that. And when she told them that, like, her friend told them that it's probably like that they won't be able to recover it, that will be unlikely to recover it, this is what they responded. This is because the people you are talking to do not know about how hacking works. When Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are involved, we work with blockchain, ICOs, and crypto VC firms to help track and recover stolen cryptocurrency.
It's just like jargon words.
Yeah,
Similar to the last time, like, the blockchain hasn't synced yet. That's why your funds are locked, and you need to send us thousands of dollars to unlock your funds. And these are like, you don't have the security clearance. It's
exactly.
Like a clear net, deep web kind of thing. Oh, jeez.
And I looked on HCCC. So the other thing they do is, they actually sometimes, because now like the scammers know her contact details, right? Like if she like contacted them or gave them the phone number, they know her, and then. Well, because people who have been scammed are more prone to be scammed again.
Yes.
And like then maybe a year or a year and a half down the line, she might be contacted again by some scammer doing a completely different scam, completely independent. But now it's kind of like, it's sad for her, because now it's like wherever she turns, she sees scammers, and then like we've got her details, they might contact her again and like try to do another scam on her. So she has to be even more careful than any other person would be.
That's right. Sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's pretty tragic. Well, hopefully she, with your help and other people that are giving her that advice, that look, I think this has gone, and this sounds very suspicious. What this other place that's trying to help you is saying. Hopefully she takes that as credible advice and I don't know, just tries to move on from it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll shift to a couple of other things. I wanted to mention something that's going on with HardBlock. So we released an affiliate program that we've been beta testing, and we approached a few people in the community, a few customers, to get them to help us beta test and be our first lot of affiliates. We're still doing beta testing. I guess you could say this is sort of stage 2. So we're opening up broader. So essentially, if anyone wants to become a HardBlock affiliate, they can just reach out to us at hello@hardblock.com.au, or you can even DM us on Twitter. That works as well. Handle is HardBlockBTC, or one word. Now, in terms of the affiliate program, so if you sign up a new referee, you get 15% of all the fees incurred by that referee for the life of their account. And if someone signs up with your affiliate code,
Oh, no, 15% of half spread.
Half spread. That's right. Yeah, that's the fees incurred by them. Yeah. So the other thing that's good to know is that anyone who signs up with an affiliate link, so your referee, that would be, they get 6 months of our free batch send automated withdrawals. So if they use the auto send feature for 6 months, that'll be free basically to withdraw their Bitcoin. So if you're interested in that sounds decent, then please reach out. Let us know.
Yeah. So we maybe down the line we might increase the kind of affiliate commission, but right now it would end up being about 0.2% of the Bitcoin affiliate child base. So if they do 10,000, so it'd be 10,000 times 0.2%.
Yes, I think that makes sense because we have a spread, which is only a few percent. But of course, it's the half spread because the spread is across the buy and the sell, and then they will get 15% of that fee. If this sounds confusing verbally, that's totally fine because we do actually have terms of service that we'll send out that explains and even has a few examples about like, okay, if your affiliate makes this kind of purchase, how much are we actually making on that? And then therefore, how much is that 15% fee that you get to keep? So if you're interested, please reach out, let us know. Can I spruik something that I developed? So I put this up on GitHub, but I thought maybe this might come in useful because we are seeing a lot more customers doing things with self-managed super funds. And so I went through an audit process recently for my self-managed super fund where I needed to provide my receiving address that I withdrew my Bitcoin into to self-custody. And I also needed to provide my public key belonging to that receiving address. And during that process, I just kind of had the hypothetical scenario where I thought, I wonder if I just had a receiving address and the apparent public key that was related to it, can I actually see if those two are derived, like if the public key can derive the receiving address or not? It took me quite a while to find like a Python script to be able to do that and no like decent website where it just lets you put in like a child public key. So I don't mean like your extended public key or your seed phrase. I don't mean any of that. Just the public key. And most websites that are like a wallet or an address calculator, they start all the way back at the private key or the mnemonic seed phrase and passphrase and everything else. So I thought, all right, I'm starting to learn to code. And I thought this would be a cool project to try to take on myself to see, can I actually come up with, something that will help people if they're doing this process, just to learn a little bit and even just verify, hey, this public key that I have that I think generates this receiving address does indeed do that. So I prepared something that does exactly that. It's available on a website. I'll put the link in the show notes. And essentially all it is you can input a public key. You can't input private keys, seed phrases, extended public keys. I've purposely left them out because that's bad for security. But you can put in a public key, say what kind of receiving address you want it to be. So whether it's legacy, compatibility, or SegWit, and it'll actually just then generate what is the receiving address that comes from this public key. I've also got an extra step where it then queries mempool space to say, well, is there any receiving, incoming, outgoing, and what's the balance? Now thinking about it, that is a bit of a security risk if no one wants that address to be queried by mempool space. So probably in the next couple of days, I'll create like a little, a radio button that says, don't connect to mempool space. But if that concerns you, you can always actually run it offline as well because it's fully open source. So you can take the code, do whatever you want with it. And if you don't have a public key or don't know where to get one, I've got some instructions on that site about how you might find it using some pretty conventional wallet software. Or if you want to just experiment with that site, just to kind of see how a public key then derives the receiving address. I've also just got a separate section on the website where you can just generate a new key pair. So it'll generate a new private key, public key, and show you what the receiving address can be. And then you can kind of verify it with the top part of it. So it's a bit educational. It could come in handy. It sort of came in handy for me. It might be one of those unique scenarios that no one ever comes across again. But I figure I'll just put it out there in case that's useful because we've talked about that before on our SMSF podcasts.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So you put your public key and you get the actual receiving address.
Exactly. Yep. And again, it's like the child public key, not the parent or the master or something. So you don't generate a bunch of different receiving addresses from it because some people have asked me that. Can't I then choose which receiving address I calculate? And that gets really into the weeds of like hierarchical, deterministically created wallets and everything else. So I've linked to a couple of resources that help explain that a bit more, but maybe this is the start of a rabbit hole for someone that goes and plays around with that and says, I don't understand how this relates to my wallet. And then they click through and read some of the details. They might learn a bit more.
And to take a step back for like people less familiar with the technicals of Bitcoin, because some people actually not aware of this. They don't. So you're receiving, you have your public and private keys, but some people don't realize that your receiving address isn't actually your public key because some people think that's the actual public key.
That's true.
So
correct.
The actual receiving address is derived from the public key.
Exactly.
Like normally, your wallet doesn't display the actual public key.
That's true.
It's kind of hidden. So for some people who are confused by that.
Absolutely. And look, even people like myself, I understand it conceptually, but when I was presented with a public key and a receiving address, I thought, well, how do I know that one's derived? Am I looking at the correct public key here? I'm like, I just want to be able to check that. I'm like, I can't do it in the wallet software. I can't find literally any website to do that. I could put in all of my key like phrases and then I can derive it, but like, I don't want to do that. I just want to check this public key and the receiving address. So Now there's a chance to do that.
And you said you needed this for your super fund?
Yeah, because they wanted me to provide the public key.
The actual public key.
Yes, correct.
And they wanted not the address, the public key.
Well, I gave them the address initially, and they said that's not enough. We actually need the public key that relates to this address. And they didn't ask for the extended public key or the private key or anything else. So I thought, well, this seems like enough to give up, because it's really only proving likely ownership. Because technically, I could have sent that Bitcoin to someone else, and then they could tell me the public key. Do you know what I mean? But that was enough to pass the audit. But then I just, had the kind of rabbit hole thought process of, well, how do I know these two are the same? And how are they checking that? Is that possible to do? How easy is that? And when I went looking, I'm like, that's actually not that easy to do unless you are good at things like a Python script or JavaScript in the background. But there's no place that you can go to just put it into a website and see. So I figured that might be an interesting thing for me to do from a learning experience. And if it's handy for anyone else or it's educational, then
I'm surprised the auditor even knew the difference between the public key and the address.
Yeah, likewise. And I asked him, what do you do with these once you get them to know that they are linked together? Because I could provide you any public key, right? And he said, well, it's not my responsibility to know that. I just need to collect these things.
Okay.
Interesting. And I said, did you know that I could have sent this Bitcoin to anyone and they can just provide me that public key? So I'm not really proving anything by giving this to you. Like, the best thing would be for me to sign a message from the private key that relates to that address, because that proves that I have the private key, but it doesn't give you any, extra information. And he said, it's not my job to understand all of that.
Okay,
so I thought, well, that we're pretty early, I think, in terms of the audit process. I imagine in the fullness of time, it will be something like signing a message that the auditor provides you with the private key belonging to the receiving address. That's probably the best way for them to do it. But look, if they are sort of behind the eight ball and just taking like a receiving address, which is what I've heard some people have done, or going to the extent of a public key, which is not that, invasive, I actually prefer that than signing a message with the private key. Just in terms of like not giving up extra information that you don't need to.
So did the auditor, was this some specialized auditor for Bitcoin auditing, or was it just generic?
Just a general SMSF auditor, and they all have to go through some level of training about like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.
So all self-managed super fund auditors have to go through training on Bitcoin?
Yes, if they're going to audit things like Bitcoin, that is. So that he probably was aware, because they in the instructions that said we want the public key, not the private key, because the private key is the access to the Bitcoin. So we don't want the private key, and you shouldn't give anyone the private key. So they were actually very good about explaining that. But then just the fact that they were just collecting this because that's what the instructions said. Because when I said, so what do you do with them? Like, he said, I just put them in a spreadsheet. I'm like, all right, cool, no worries. You don't know what you're doing with them.
I'm kind of surprised that they actually have a process for this and that they have at least some knowledge of what's going on. I thought they'd be completely clueless. But
I think they're catching up. Especially as more and more people seem to be going to SMSFs or self-managed super funds, and just like Bitcoin and generally cryptocurrencies, I don't think it's going backwards. It's only going to keep going forward. So I think pretty quickly regulatory and compliance and auditors will be catching up to try to find out how do we prove ownership, or how do we track this stuff, whatever it might be. In fact, we've got some news in this podcast about exactly that.
Just one quick thing. I don't know if we have time, but
no, we do.
About like on that, about a lot. You mentioned that a lot of people have SMSFs. So last week at the Adelaide Bitcoin meetup, Jeremy done a presentation on how to set up a super fund to invest in Bitcoin. And during the presentation, a lot of people actually giving helpful advice about the process, and then afterwards, Jeremy. So it seems a lot of people here are familiar with the process. So he got a show of hands of who actually has a self-managed super fund.
Yeah, how many?
And it was like 70% of the meetup had already gone through the process.
That's so good.
So obviously that's like in the Bitcoin meetup. So that's kind of like a different crowd than normal. But
sampling bias.
Yeah, we were actually surprised that pretty much most of the people there already knew about it.
I think we're going to see that trend continue to increase over time, because like self-sovereignty, it applies to all of your assets really. And self-managed super fund, it's a no-brainer. Like for me, my superannuation felt like it wasn't even my money until I decided I actually want to have control over that. I want to buy Bitcoin with that. So I need to take kind of custody of those funds. As soon as I've done that, I'm now more diligently looking at how much fees am I paying? What am I paying these things for? What am I doing with this money? Whereas before it was like, I don't know, it's just in some pool of fund that someone's managing. Apparently it'll be okay. So I love it.
That's what Jeremy also mentioned, which I can imagine. Because you actually, especially with Bitcoin, because it's not even some fund, you actually own it. Like if you have it on your own hardware wallet, you can it's like you have control of it, and
Exactly.
it's yours.
I think it's a good idea. We've got a podcast episode out already with the SMSF expert talking about the whole process of setup. Jeremy and I recently recorded one that's probably coming out in a week or two about our just general personal reflections on the process as well and what we've decided to invest in. So, yeah, I think keep an eye out for that or an ear out for that if it sounds interesting. All right, we'll jump into the news. We've got like a decent amount to get through. Start with global and government news. So I found this very interesting. Now, 80% of countries around the world have a CPI over 6%. We talk about CPI and inflation a lot, so I don't know if this requires too much, kind of discussion, but I just found it interesting that we're getting to a point now where those levels hadn't been seen. Oh, I forget the chart, but I've linked it in the show notes, but it's probably about 20 or 30 years, or perhaps even more, since we've had 80% or more countries across the world having a CPI of over 6%. And that's back in, other times when a lot of like financial crises occurring. So we're kind of getting back to this sort of breaking point in terms of financial crisis. And it's not just, the US or Australia or other places that we often talk about. This is prolific across the world. So interesting to watch. And I guess that's probably just going to keep creeping up. It'll be 80% that are over 8% and 80% over 10%. It's just a matter of time, really. The other bit of news is Argentina has promised to end their budget financing by printing more money. So what they want to do instead is to tame their annual CPI, which is above about 60% at the moment, by taking things like private loans and by running budget surpluses. So, I mean, how long do you think that'll last?
Yeah, I mean, like Argentina has been going through bankruptcies for the last 30, 40 years. So I think they resigned themselves to a fight. To that fight, they'll have hyperinflation, they'll declare themselves bankrupt, and then the cycle repeats again.
It's just, I don't know, what's the word? Like empty promises. We promised we won't print any more money. What we're going to do is we're going to take private loans and we're going to run a budget surplus. I mean, I think taking private loans to some degree is still not going to be great for them, because if they take a private loan, because some of these private loans are from like sovereign wealth funds from other countries that I'm sure like the IMF is in there somewhere, etc. Those loans will be denominated in the other currency, so like US dollars or something like that, which is still not great for the Argentinian, local currency. So I don't know how that's going to tame their inflation, but I think it's great that they're going to try this, or at least they're saying they're going to try this. I think they probably need like a hard money Bitcoin standard instead, but that's their journey to go on to figure out. So there's not a lot of sorry, you go.
Oh, no, sorry. Oh, so I misunderstood you. So they're going to end I thought you said that they're going to continue it.
No, sorry. The way that
this
sentence is phrased is probably not the best. So Argentina pledges to end budget financing by money printing.
Okay, so that's a good thing, I guess.
Yes, well, in quotations, a good thing if they follow through on it. So they're basically saying, we're not going to print any more money. We're just going to take private loans and we're going to run a budget surplus. But they've been unsuccessful with that approach in the past. And they've also had money printing to rely on. So now without the money printing, we'll see how long that lasts until they have to pivot back to it. I think once they get to probably even more of maybe a social crisis or a humanitarian crisis over there, they'll then say, oh, look, sorry, we have to go back to money printing because obviously this other way is just not working. But, good on them for trying. So global institutional news. Everyone's probably heard about this one, but Michael Saylor resigns as the CEO of MicroStrategy. Now, if you listen to like Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal, they're basically saying he's resigning because, the whole Bitcoin play was such a failure and he's lost so much money that he has to step down. However, if you listen to Michael Saylor, some of the meetings that he'll publicize from MicroStrategy, as well as like their official documentation, that's not really the case. He's saying he's stepping down as CEO, which was initially a plan that he had anyway. He's remaining executive chairman of MicroStrategy. And so his job would be to oversee their Bitcoin acquisition strategy and to continue evangelizing on a more full-time basis Bitcoin. So he hasn't expressed any regrets in his strategy whatsoever. He said it's actually the most successful thing that his company has done. And if you look at his company versus other tech stocks, it's actually outperformed them incredibly over the last few years since going to that strategy. So I think that's good news, actually. It's similar to Jack Dorsey stepping down from, the CEO of Twitter, so he can just focus, purely on Bitcoin. We're getting more full-time Bitcoin evangelists. So I think that's a pretty cool thing.
I mean, it's hard to know because on the other hand, he could be just saying that, and MicroStrategy could be saying that to save face. So it certainly doesn't look kind of a bit suspicious when it's a bear market and one of the guys who advocated this strategy steps down as CEO. Yeah, but who knows what the truth is?
That's true. I think we'll probably have to watch what he does and what they do rather than what they say. So if they keep acquiring Bitcoin and don't sell any Bitcoin, then we know that they're probably, what they've said is like mostly true.
Yeah.
But you never know. It could be trying to save face or kind of distance himself.
Right.
My personal belief is that what he said is probably pretty accurate because, geez, you wouldn't want to shoot yourself in the foot to say like, no, we're going to keep acquiring Bitcoin. That's my job now. Then next week, MicroStrategy sells some of its Bitcoin. That would just be, kind of do yourself in with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. We'll see what they do.
Now, another big bit of news is that BlackRock, who has previously said, Bitcoin's going to die, Bitcoin isn't ESG friendly enough, Bitcoin's going to zero, etc. So BlackRock, which is, just for anyone who doesn't know, the world's largest asset manager. So they have over $10 trillion US dollars of assets under their management. They've partnered with Coinbase, the evil empire Coinbase, to bring Bitcoin trading to their institutional clients. Kind of sad that it's not going out to retail clients as well at this point, but I guess that's how it usually goes, isn't it? Institutional gets it first and then retail kind of gets it downstream of that. But still, for BlackRock to be now believing that Bitcoin is here for the long term, well enough for them to sort of step into it and maybe, in quotations, ESG friendly enough for them to kind of adopt it for their clients, I think that's decent news.
Yeah, some more institutional clients will be able to invest in Bitcoin.
Yes,
price go up.
Yes, the price go up, exactly. Now, those people are probably not self-custodying. They're probably maybe even buying IOUs of Bitcoin, which is not the best thing. But, in terms of adoption news, this is heading the right direction, isn't it? We're getting some of the people that were against Bitcoin now on board to say, hey, look, I could probably profit from this. Maybe there's something here. It's not going away, so I might as well get on board. This is at the if you can't beat them, join them phase, maybe. Another bit of news is Binance and MasterCard have launched a Bitcoin prepaid credit card, which is also a rewards card in Argentina. So this is interesting news that kind of is coupled with the previous news about Argentina is going to stop their money printing. At the same time, customers now can get 8% cashback on purchases if they use this card. Now, it's not just in Argentina that this card is valid either. It's at all 90 million MasterCard merchants globally. So it's pretty interesting, I guess, both partnership as well as, I guess, a payment rails and even a cashback rails for the Argentinian people. So pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, from what I hear, people who've been to Argentina tell me that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies too, it must be said, have been gaining adoption in Argentina. Like people use them because of that inflation, and it's been gaining much more adoption than in other places.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Because their other alternative would be the US dollar, which is still having problems with inflation as well. So they almost need like a longer term alternative. And something like Bitcoin makes sense as like your long-term store of value, US dollar is your medium-term store of value, perhaps. And then the Argentinian, I think it's their peso, is you spend it today, basically, don't hold it for longer than that. So Honduras launches Bitcoin Valley, which is a Bitcoin-focused circular economy in the town of St. Lucia or Santa Lucia. It's very similar to Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, Bitcoin Jungle in Costa Rica, and Bitcoin Ikasi in South Africa. And to be honest, I'm probably forgetting a few other of these sort of circular economies that have popped up around the place. But that's pretty interesting news. I think Samson Mao was promising Honduras to adopt it as legal tender. This is, I guess, just a drop in the ocean compared to that, but maybe a step in the right direction still.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's always better. Like the legal tender thing is cool, but I think most Bitcoiners would agree that actually what's much better is when it's kind of ground up, grassroots adoption. That's actually even better.
I agree with that. And some of the news, institutional news tends to get the big headline because it means like adoption's moving forward faster. But I would rather hear a grassroots project like this, or even retail investors getting access to something rather than institutional investors or even state investors. But people love that because that's the big money and that's number go up. But I agree with you, stretching it out a little bit longer in terms of number go up and getting actual people in. That's what Bitcoin's meant to be for, at least in my mind. So Galoy, which is the developer behind Bitcoin Beach's Lightning wallet, they're adding a new feature, which is Bitcoin-backed synthetic US dollars, which enables users to send, receive, and hold US dollars that are backed by Bitcoin. And so this isn't a stable coin, so there's no separate token. There's no like underpinning asset that's another cryptocurrency or even something like a US dollar, the underpinning asset is Bitcoin. And it's a bit confusing. And I'm linking to an article that explains both their implementation as well as some of the risks with their implementation, because the way that they do this is with something called inverse perpetual swaps. I don't even think I can explain this succinctly in just like a few sentences, because there's like whole articles that explain this quite well. So I think I'll just link to it. But I guess the summary is inverse perpetual swaps are what's being done for users to be able to say, in my wallet, when I receive Bitcoin, I want 20% of that to be held in US dollars, and I want the other 80% to just be in Bitcoin. But the US dollar is actually still Bitcoin. It's just pegged to the US dollar. Now, what that means is if the Bitcoin price goes up, they kind of lose out on that 20% because they don't get to realize that Bitcoin gain. But of course, if the Bitcoin price goes down, they don't get those losses either. They still retain the dollar value. Now, the downside to this whole process is that at the moment, it's still a centralized process. So Galoy, which is the creator of the wallet, they use OKX as an exchange. And the exchange is what places this inverse perpetual swap to allow the Bitcoin value to be pegged to the US dollar. So there's counterparty risk there. Dylan Leclerc wrote an article that talks about this automatic deleveraging situation as well, where if there's a huge move in the market, it's possible that people might not be protected in that regard either. So again, this is sort of beyond my understanding of how some of these things work. So I'd say if you're interested in this, or it sounds really good or really bad, I reckon go have a read of both of those articles. There's actually a few articles that kind of link off from the main one that I'll leave in the show notes. So interesting news nonetheless, especially now that we're starting to dabble with stable coins without actually an underpinning stable coin or a new token or, you know, a shitcoin behind it or something like that. I think this is something that people have thought is possible for a while, but it hasn't been done. So it's kind of nice to see that happening. But I'd say experimental, like don't put in more than what you're expecting to lose, essentially.
I don't completely get it. So like, would this be in any Lightning? So this would be using Lightning only, right?
Yes, but this is their wallet in particular that they're implementing.
So it would only like work in their wallet. You couldn't send it to, like, if I've got Blue Wallet, I couldn't send this to my Blue Wallet or whatever.
No, but when you decide, okay, I want to now spend this Bitcoin, you can then just very easily send that Bitcoin to someone else. It's just no longer backed or pegged to the US dollar, if that makes sense, because it all remains on the Bitcoin network. This is not integrated with like existing financial networks. So you can't send $1 to someone else unless, I guess, they're at Bitcoin Beach and on the Bitcoin Beach wallet. And then there's probably some integration in that regard. But if they were to send you money, they would need to then say, okay, I want to turn this Bitcoin back to US dollar, back to Bitcoin, and then send it to Daniel, on his Blue Wallet. And that would work. So I think for now, this is really mainly influencing or impacting people at Bitcoin Beach to give them this extra ability to store in US dollars instead, but without an extra token, without,
maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but it doesn't sound very impressive to me. It just sounds like within their wallet, they've got like a feature where they partner with an exchange to somehow hedge.
That's exactly what they're doing.
And it's like, okay, so it's basically you've got some an additional feature within the wallet, but it's like it's almost nothing to do with Lightning, from what I understand, but it's implementing the Lightning wallet.
Yes, correct.
Right.
But I don't think this was news about Lightning. It's basically saying like we now have a stable. I don't want to call it a stable coin because it's not really a separate token, but we've now got like a stable way to peg Bitcoin to US dollars without issuing a new token, without having some kind of like cryptocurrency that like underpins it apart from Bitcoin. So I think it's big news for that. But no, it's not necessarily big news for the Lightning Network, except for if other wallets start to implement something similar. And especially if they start going beyond just centralized exchanges or maybe distributing it across multiple exchanges, like that's a way that could kind of reduce some of the cons of the pro that comes with it. I guess the part for me is like it's experimental, but it's showing that what can be possible without actually having another token, like a stablecoin token.
And I'm guessing if you have it like a Bitcoin tied up in this hedged account, I'm pretty sure you don't control the keys either, right?
No, it goes to the exchange, which is the counterparty risk part. So you have to trust OKX will give you that Bitcoin back, and that they're not going to go under, that they're not going to rehypothecate it and everything else. So again, I don't think this is not like everyone should go be doing it now, but it's more like, look, this is something that's possible. There's some ways that this can be extended out to reduce the risk, and just interesting news. So moving on to Australian news. Australia's annual CPI, as of the quarter ending in June, has reached 6.1%. So I think that my guess last time when we talked about what are our guesses for CPI was 6%. And that's purely based on the narrative of the RBA and the ABS saying that we'll probably be at about 6.7% by December. So I'm thinking if that's where they want to try to shoot for or where they want to try to keep the number, we're just going to be like a gradual increase from there. So maybe in the next quarter, we're like 6.5. And then in the last quarter, we're about 6.7 or 7%. Of course, this is CPI, not actual inflation. The actual inflation number is far higher. But yeah, we're now at 6.1%, far above the target of 2 to 3.
Yeah.
A bit of interesting news in regards to chain analysis, surveillance, some of the stuff we touched on a little bit earlier on, is that the Australian government, particularly the Australian Signals Directorate, or ASD, has signed a contract with chain analysis for $2.1 million. So what I've linked to is actually just the tender documents of the successful contracts. So it's probably not going to be that interesting. But I guess to me, reading between the lines is that it's probably unlikely that we're going to have something like a Bitcoin ban here. Not that I think that's really gotten much traction in terms of people's belief, but you probably wouldn't have governments starting to buy, chain analysis software subscriptions unless they had some expectation that things like Bitcoin are probably going to be around longer term, that their citizens are going to be using it, that it could have like legs internationally, etc. So, I mean, for privacy, probably not the best thing. But in terms of adoption, I would say probably directionally maybe a good thing.
Yeah. So, I guess one thing is because we've Australian Bitcoin industry body, like when talking with Austrac, and they possibly might possibly partner with chain analysis. I'm not exactly sure what the status is there, but a lot of governments have partnered and other kind of organizations counted similar to Austrac, but in other countries
that makes sense.
Have partnered with chain analysis. And one issue is because chain analysis builds you feed it data and kind of builds
like a probabilistic model of
by personal data, I guess, and that data gets then shared with all these other countries. So, I mean, is Australian Signals Directorate going to be giving Australian customer data, Australians' data into chain analysis, which is then going to other countries? So that's something to kind of push back against, because I don't believe they should be doing that.
Yeah, agreed. Because it becomes like a honeypot, doesn't it? Like if you know that there's an organization or a database that has all the addresses, the potential identities, and which ones, like other addresses they're potentially linked to, it's a big prize for like a hacker or someone who's like in another country. It's an adversary. It could be like another state, or it could be again just like a black hat hacker that wants to get that information and sell it to the highest bidder. Like it's usually bad when you have a honeypot full of data, and data generally always gets breached, especially when it's managed by the government. So it hasn't been clear what this is going to be used for. It's just more so people have found the tender documents to say they've signed this contract. So it's there, but we don't know the purpose behind it apart from chain surveillance, which is exactly what chain analysis does.
I mean, we don't want Australian data on Australians to be shared with other governments through chain analysis.
Yes,
that's
agreed.
It's a privacy issue,
definitely,
the way I see it.
Yeah, likewise. Well, in similar news, Victoria Police have been granted, I guess, or approved sweeping new asset seizure powers, including related to cryptocurrencies, where they can seize cryptocurrencies or go to exchanges where they believe someone has an account with cryptocurrency in it, for any criminals that have any association with drugs or guns, essentially. So I don't know if this is totally new news. I mean, it is new in terms of the new powers that they've received, but I kind of feel like if they could seize cryptocurrency of that sort of genre of criminals, they could have probably done that previously anyway. I think maybe they're just getting enhanced powers to be able to go to exchanges and, maybe warrantless, permissionless, seek data, that kind of thing. And again, it's, how this is enforced, I'm not really sure. If someone has their own keys and it's unclear, it's hard for them to get that. But Australian news, so I think just be mindful of it. And at the moment, this appears to be just in Victoria. So another bit of Australian news, I guess this is more positive news, or at least it sounds like it in the headline, but I've included it to give a bit of context. So there was a headline that MasterCard is going to launch a Bitcoin-backed card like credit card in Australia, accepted by all their merchants. So kind of similar to the Argentinian news that we mentioned just before. And so that sounded really good, but it's not actually MasterCard that's doing it. So it's a company called eBank International, which recently started a crypto and NFT exchange in Australia called Ebonex. And so Ebonex is partnering with MasterCard to launch a crypto-backed credit card for their exchange users. So the way that this headline has been like sort of spread around Twitter is that MasterCard is launching their own Bitcoin-backed credit card that everyone can use in Australia. But no, it's Ebonex is partnering with MasterCard to release a crypto-backed credit card, which includes Bitcoin, to just their customers. But this is very much a shitcoin and NFT exchange. So I feel like this is probably watered down a bit in terms of it's not MasterCard by themselves. It's not all of Australia. It's just this particular shitcoin exchange that recently started. But I mean, that's how it starts, isn't it? If MasterCard sees traction there, they might decide, hey, maybe we should have our own specifically for broader use. We'll see. So moving on to a bit of technical news. Bitfinex and Tether have collaborated with Hypercall, which is an open source protocol team. And together they're launching a new peer-to-peer communications application called Keat, which I've experimented a little bit with and it seems pretty cool. Basically, you can exchange instant video, messaging, and file transfers. And essentially you can, because I use it on Linux, so you just get an app image, you can open up the program itself.
Use Keat.
Keat,
service.
And then you can just get a link and provide that link to someone else to say join my chat or join my group. And look, I haven't experimented with it too much, but my understanding is you can actually have multiple people join, and then you can have encrypted peer-to-peer group chats that doesn't go through any kind of centralized server. You can do file transfers, video transfers, that kind of thing. So this is just, I would call it like at the experimental phase. So I'm not giving any kind of certainty to like how good the end-to-end encryption is, or whether that's even working at the moment. I haven't experimented or like reviewed the code or something like that to that deep, but it looks pretty cool as an idea. And it's nice to see Bitcoin-based stuff being released in this way that's trying to compete with places like Zoom or Skype, some of the more centralized messaging or peer-to-peer, which they're not really peer-to-peer, but you know what I mean.
So it's supposed to be a peer-to-peer Zoom.
Basically, that's right. But with file transfers and video transfers as well.
So is it similar? Because what's that other video?
Jitsi.
Jitsi.
I don't think
that can be peer-to-peer, can it?
Yes, Jitsi is really good. I think if anyone is looking for an alternative to like Zoom or Skype, usually Jitsi is my go-to suggestion. I don't think that has file transfers, so you can do video calls, voice calls, you can do chat, of course. But I don't think you could send like a 500 megabyte file or gig file or something like that, whereas apparently you can do that on Keat. So just interesting news, something to watch. Another bit of news is Anthony Ronning and Paul Miller have released a privacy-focused Lightning wallet. So we've talked about Lightning privacy on a few different pods, some with Rusty, some with Lloyd, some with even Catan. And on our HardBlock Twitter, we've posted quite a few references to some of Anthony Ronning's work, some of his past talks at like Bitcoin Miami, some of the past work that he's done that's been put in like an article format. So I thought it was just cool to follow up to say, well, a lot of those problems that have been proposed, they're now trying to solve with a Lightning wallet implementation. Again, this is, I would say, very experimental. You probably don't even use it with anything that you expect not to lose. But maybe if you're curious about this and you like to dabble, then it could be something to look at. Just as a bit of trivia, you can't actually receive from the private Lightning wallet. That's kind of part of getting around the privacy issues in Lightning, is to say this should be purely a spending wallet until they can figure out how to do receiving a bit more privately, which is probably more at the protocol level, not at just like the application implementation level. So 2 bits of news, which are really just like, I guess, nice adoption and technical news, is that the Lightning network capacity has reached another all-time high of 4,400 Bitcoin. Now, I think last time we talked, it was like 4,100 or 4,200. So it's kind of decent for it to be another almost 10% above that. One that I really like as well is that the Whirlpool unspent capacity reached an all-time high of 5,200 Bitcoin. So that's people that are mixing in Sparrow Wallet and Samurai Wallet, the Whirlpool implementation, and that continues to grow. Another bit of news, which I don't actually have here, but it relates to that, is it's nice to see more people improving their privacy, especially as the US just sanctioned Tornado Cash, which is Ethereum's kind of version of Whirlpool, like very different implementations, obviously, but similar kind of outcome where you put your Ethereum in at a specific equal amount. So it might be like 0.1 Ethereum or whatever it might be. That is in a bunch of pool of funds, which then you can withdraw that same amount from like 0.1, and you're getting someone else's Ethereum basically. So it's like mixed. So the US just this morning sanctioned Tornado Cash, and since they've sanctioned it, because they were saying that some of the addresses that have gone into Tornado Cash have been from like North Korean, cyber, probably like state and maybe even criminal entities. And so since then, Tornado Cash has been shut down. The GitHub has been deleted, and the main developer on GitHub, his account's been frozen. And if you go to the website now, it no longer exists. So it's open source, which means that if someone gets the original source code, they can just sort of, start up another one. But it's, very interesting to see how even something that's like a decentralized app on top of Ethereum, I say decentralized like in quotations, can be shut down within just a couple of hours of the US government saying, we don't want that in operation anymore. And even something like GitHub, where I feel like a lot of people think is, a bit protected because it's open source and that should be free speech, etc. It didn't take very long for GitHub to shut down the project and to freeze the main developer's account. I heard every developer's account got deleted, but when I looked into it, it sounds like just the main developer, his account's been frozen. Interesting news. And I guess at the same time, you've got Whirlpool making new all-time highs. And I guess the true test is when the US government starts to say things like, Whirlpool or Wasabi or Join Market, like they need to be shut down as well. What then happens with those kind of services? I'm pretty confident Whirlpool would stay around after that point regardless. But we'll see. We're probably entering that phase, like the fight on privacy, basically, in Bitcoin.
Cool. And just one other thing, the SAT spend has been getting some interest. Some people, you mentioned some people like forked it. So the already one that is up and running is the Netherlands Bitcoin community. So they've taken like the map version or the map section, and implemented on their website. But then, an Atlanta community as well has forked the whole page. And it looks like they just intend to use the page as a basis and sort of input their details instead, which I think is awesome. UTXO Club, which is like Nick CLI, sometimes people might know him as, mentioned that some people were interested in doing the same thing in Nashville as well, from conversations he had. So, it'll be interesting to see like who else kind of grabs that and tries to make Bitcoin circular economy more accessible in their place. And I think over time, as that network grows, it'd be good if we can kind of link back to each other's pages, just so everyone realizes like this is a kind of an ecosystem that's growing. Sorry.
I just, and for those who don't know, SatSpan, it's basically a website which lists all the Australian businesses which accept Bitcoin.
There's like an interactive table that you can
maintains, and so it's a pretty cool, project, and
it's been fun. It's been a good learning experience. Especially trying to figure out like, this will sound very basic to anyone who's been in development, but like, how can I make a table that then I can search for it and have like little error messages if there's nothing in there, and I don't want it to show me duplicate, entries, and how can I also have like an interactive searchable map? So that was an interesting process for me to kind of go through. But now the fact that other people are using it is, it feels nice. And so if anyone is in a place, probably apart from Australia, that thinks that would be a cool idea to do, you've now got a format, like you've got, or a template, is probably the right word, where just change the details to yours, input the locations and addresses of the places that accept Bitcoin in your area, and all of a sudden you've got your own SAT spend, you've got your own Bitcoin business list. So and if you need any help with that, please reach out. I'm always happy to share ideas.
And obviously, if you have Bitcoin, try and spend it and go to these businesses, like it's owned by other Bitcoiners and you're supporting their business. And because one of the issues sometimes we don't get many people using these facilities.
That's true.
So go over and support them. Use your Bitcoin as money. It's money, so use it as money.
And look, if you don't want to spend your Bitcoin, just adopt the spend and replace model, where you spend it, but then you replace the same amount. So you never lose the amount of Bitcoin you have. You're just helping to further the economy, the Bitcoin economy, because it's pretty sad. Like when I went through the initial list, because I found about 5 lists of potential Bitcoin businesses, there was maybe like 80 or so businesses on it. Probably not half, but maybe like 40% of those businesses weren't even around anymore. And of the remaining businesses, only about half of them still accepted Bitcoin, because they said, well, no one used it, and it just became too complicated, and we had new staff and trying to explain it to them. So we decided to get rid of it. And it said, like, do you think people will use it? Because we'll go back to it if people are going to use it. But like, I can't promise that. So hopefully if we get more people spending, there'll be more businesses that do decide to accept it. Because the ones that did in the last few years, kind of sad. A lot of them didn't get much traction. So
well, hopefully that will improve, especially with Lightning Network.
Definitely.
becoming like better, and like everything is coming along. So hopefully that will improve.
Absolutely. Yeah, the more easier in terms of access it becomes, and quicker in terms of transactions, and cheaper in terms of transactions, I think that's all a good thing. And look, if you're in Australia and you have a business that accepts Bitcoin, or you're considering doing so, please reach out. I can add you to the list. Cool. Well, look, that's pretty much all the news that we had for today. If you've enjoyed, please share it around. If you can leave a review on a podcasting app, then please do so, because that does help the podcast out. Otherwise, Daniel, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. And until next time.